Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
And we're the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right. Hopefully, producer Doug enjoyed that episode that we just released that he asked for in 2019 or 2020.
Oh yeah, I hope he did. I know he enjoyed our Thomas the Tank Engine episode, so I think we're making producer Doug happy, and that's all that matters.
Because all that matters is that he gets to say a bunch of puns when he shares it on Facebook. Did you know you can follow producer Doug on Facebook?
You can.
You look him up, and when you see the man who looks decidedly artificial intelligence created and kind of like JJJ, then that's him. He's not managed by either Zach or I. He is managed by our producer Doug.
Of course, producer Doug manages himself.
But producer Doug maintains a persona.
Yes.
So anyway, yeah. So how have things been? How have been kicks going?
Kicks?
Do you like that we're almost done with the year?
Yeah. Well, no. We're nowhere near done with the year. We are.
Yeah, it's all of January. It's like 80% of the year, and then it's Christmas.
That's true. Well, this episode's already out in February.
I know. It's already. That's why I said we're already done with the year.
Yeah, we're already done. We're getting into Valentine's Day, and then
St. Patrick's Day, Memorial Day. August is Victory over Japan Day, celebrated by Hawaii and Rhode Island.
Yep, the two states that are small.
This is Patriots Day coming up.
Patriots Day is coming up in April. Battle of Lexington and Concord, the day we told the British to get out of here.
Fun story about Patriots Day, though, is our mother, classic mom. She immigrated from Connecticut to Massachusetts a number of years ago and started working in Massachusetts.
The foreign shores of Connecticut.
The foreign shores of Connecticut. In Connecticut, they don't celebrate Patriots Day, but in Massachusetts, they do celebrate it. Our mother, classic mom, she saw that they had Patriots Day off, and she said, wow, they must really like that football team. And it took her a little while to realize it was, in fact, a historical day in history.
Classic Dad, I think, also made a comment once about Patriots Day being about the team, and I corrected him.
Right, yeah, no. It's just like if there was Minuteman Day and it was about the man from Freedom Force. We did an episode on Freedom Force.
We did do an episode on Freedom Force, and we talked about it recently when we were talking about X-Men, because of the group, the Freedom Force, that the X-Men went against at one point.
Which, to be fair, the superior group is the Freedom Force from the Freedom Force video game by Irrational, not Freedom Force, the collection of weird characters that are Canadian.
No, that's Alpha Flight, which is Canadian.
Oh.
Freedom Force is the collection of
right.
like some former Brotherhood of Mutants when they tried to do some good things, I think. Like Mystique, I think, is part of Freedom Force. Anyway.
Well, regardless, they're not led by the Minuteman, so they don't matter.
No, and regardless, we're not talking about Freedom Force, Minutemen, Patriots, or any of those things in today's episode. But before we get into today's episode, Seth, what have you been recently playing?
Recently, I've been playing Fallout New Vegas. Obviously, the show has been going on. I've been watching the show. I'm a week delayed. I watch it on Tuesdays, not Thursdays, but I watch it the following Tuesday, obviously, because Tuesday, the day, falls before Thursday, the day. So I watch it a week after, like a half a week after it comes out, because it is my show that I watch at the gym to inspire me to go to the gym. So I watch Fallout. So I remembered that I had a Fallout New Vegas game, and I thought that I would play it and stream it for Zach for a little bit. And that, once again, Fallout New Vegas was developed by Obsidian and published by Bethesda Softworks and came out in 2010. So it's 16 years old as a game now. And they should be possibly re-releasing a remaster, which will be helpful because the game is sometimes really a pain in the butt, especially if you run it on a Steam Deck, it works fine. I have played hours of it on the Steam Deck with no issue whatsoever. Play it on a computer that is a little bit better than a Steam Deck. It struggles so bad. Constant crashing and all that jazz. The Fallout New Vegas game I'm playing through is a character by the name of Barney. He is level 6 and a cannibal and is really smart, really hardy, really agile, and he is dumb as a brick house. Like, he is just dumb. He is not charismatic. I think his charisma is a 1. His intelligence is like a 2 or a 3, and his perception is a 3, and only because I think he's wearing glasses that gives him a buff to it. So, like, he is not great, but His strength and his endurance are 10s. So at level 6, he has close to 330 hit points. He casually just walks through the wasteland and just kills everybody who encounters, and generally comes out on top because he utterly annihilates people. Because everyone he fights is scaled down to level 6, because that's how the game works. It puts it in scalable counters for you. And so everyone he fights is ready to fight somebody who's level 6, and he is certainly level 6, but he is certainly a force to be reckoned with when it comes to killing. And Zach was watching me when the Viper Gunslingers besieged me, and I killed them all as Barney, and then ate them, because that's what Barney does. To the point, he is so incredibly strong and hardy, is that somebody threw 3 grenades at him, and they killed their party members that they were nearby, and they did nothing to Barney. Barney just continued to stand there as he slowly walked around, and he uses a bladed gauntlet. Eventually, we'll be using a power fist, but he uses a bladed gauntlet and just walks around and punches people. And I enjoy playing as Barney, mostly because he's kind of dumb and kind of just doesn't really... Zach enjoyed it because I started the game and didn't know what I was doing, and immediately just walked over and started killing some random people. And because I was like, powder gangers, I hate powder gangers, and just walked over and killed some powder gangers, failed a quest, and continued to walk on to my destination in the middle of a Legionnaire encampment. Now, mind you, I will kill all the Legionnaires at one point in time, but first I have to get close to Kaiser so I can eat him, because you get an achievement if you eat all of the powerful bosses. You have to eat Elvis, President Kimball, House himself, and Kaiser. The achievement, or the perk as it were, it's a special perk. It's called the Meat of Champions. Very difficult to do. It also doesn't give you that great of a bonus. It actually only gives you temporary bonuses after eating another corpse, which, to be fair, my character is doing this as well. But the easiest way to do it is to progress to render onto Kaiser, because if you do render onto Kaiser through the Legionnaires, throughout those quest chains, President Kimball and Mr. House are required to be killed by the Legion. So then you could eat them during those times, during those quests, because you'll be exposed to them to accomplish the quest. And then there's a moment in time where you can operate on Caesar, and you could eat him. And if you're skilled in speech, you could just get away with it. You could just be like, oopsies.
Oops, I hit him by accident.
Because you're like a doctor. I don't think Barney's that smart to get away with it. I think he's just going to have to be vilified by all factions. But it is essentially locks you out of 3 of the major 4 factions, meaning that you have to end the game with Yes Man in order to complete the main story. But yeah, so it is apparently the developer Jason Bergman came up with the idea for Meat of Champions, which I think is fun. I think it's a fun perk to get. I think if it gives me an achievement too, I'll be super happy about that, because I think that'll be a fun achievement to have on Steam. So Zach, what have you recently been playing?
Recently I've been playing Banjo Recompiled, which actually came out just a few days ago as of the recording of this podcast. As in, I think when I was playing it, it was released the day before. So I was playing it yesterday on the 25th of January, and it was released on the 24th or 23rd of January. This is a recompiled port of Banjo-Kazooie to the PC, done by a dedicated N64 modding and hacking group. This allows the game to be played on PC in full resolution with improved textures, updated frame rate, modern controls, and any mods you want to drop into it. There's mods for new levels, there's mods for new textures and new graphics, very similar to the Super Mario 64 recomp that came out a few years ago, or the Ocarina of Time recomp that's still in development. If you're familiar with either of those, then you should be familiar with what Banjo Recompiled is doing. For those unfamiliar, a recomp is basically recompiling the original program to become an executable file that can be run on modern hardware. This usually involves different techniques of getting the original code to be decompiled first, and then once you decompile it, you recompile it so that it can be run on updated hardware, or you can even port the game over to a new console entirely. Super Mario 64 is kind of famous for its recompilation, as there's been a lot of news in the porting scene of that. I think someone even has gone forward to port Super Mario 64 to the Game Boy Advance, which is buck wild, because that is such a low-powered console to be playing an entirety of Super Mario 64. I don't know if it's the entirety, but I do know that the recomp helped a lot with the development of that port. But with Banjo Recomp, it's the same idea. You're bringing Banjo to modern hardware, and it's great. I love Banjo-Kazooie. I was actually playing Banjo-Kazooie for the N64 the day before I played the recomp. So it's fun to kind of compare them, and the improved frame rate, updated controls, and all those things definitely help a lot with making the game feel as good as it is. If you're not familiar with Banjo-Kazooie, it is a collectathon, so you're tasked with collecting items in different worlds in order to save Banjo's sister from the evil Gruntilda. To do so, you just travel around. You collect different things like puzzle pieces or music notes or other things that will help you in your quest. I definitely recommend checking out Banjo-Kazooie if you like those type of 90s platformers, but if you want to play it on modern hardware, Banjo Recomp is a great way to do so, and it's available for download. You do need to provide a copy of Banjo-Kazooie that I'm sure you can find somewhere on the internet if you want to look, but other than that, it's pretty much good to go.
Nice. That's fun. I never really got into Banjo-Kazooie.
I like it a lot. It's a good game. Well, to get into today's episode, we're going to be talking about something kind of from our childhood. I think Seth might be more familiar with the classic era of this franchise. I'm in particular familiar with the slightly later era. But we're talking about He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. In terms of our memories, I'll start. I never played any of the He-Man games, as a bunch of them were, I think, UK exclusives. But I did watch the 2002 He-Man TV show, which I remember being pretty good. I don't remember a single thing about the show beyond its opening intro, which was like a redo of the original intro to the 80s He-Man, where Prince Adam's there and he's like, "Hi, I'm Adam, Prince of Eternia." And before he's like even starts his speech, he gets blasted at by Skeletor, and it just immediately cuts into the music. And then a booming voice goes, "He-Man, He-Man, and the Masters of the Universe."
I have the power!
I do think I have watched episodes of 80s He-Man thanks to Boomerang, which was a program that Cartoon Network ran where they showed older television shows that were part of their license. So this included things like the Hanna-Barbera superhero shows that were popular in the 70s, such as the original Space Ghost and
Herculoids,
and the original Birdman, which wasn't called Birdman, it was called like the Galaxy Trio. Birdman. Or Dynamite, which featured the Blue Falcon. So all those classic shows I remember being on Boomerang, and I'm pretty sure they also aired episodes of He-Man occasionally, as He-Man was in syndication, so Cartoon Network would have had episodes to show. But what about you, Seth? Do you have any memories of He-Man? I don't know if you played any of the games. Again, they were British exclusives for most of them, but...
Yeah, so I did watch the 80s He-Man because there was a period of time where Cartoon Network always showed their older stuff, even when like when I was a kid and all that stuff, and like so they would play He-Man and like Hercules, Space Ghost, Johnny Quest, and all those guys, and so I was exposed to He-Man. I didn't watch it as frequently. I think I missed the boat. A lot of the He-Man, G.I. Joe, and those cartoons were a little bit older than when I was consuming cartoons, but they still were around and I still watched them. But so I did see episodes, but not as like, I didn't see like every episode of He-Man. Like,
right,
I watched it because the Thundercats come out around the same time or similar.
A little after, I think.
I felt like that some of those cartoons, there was like a blend of just men raising swords to their faces or eyes in the air and doing something. So
yeah.
Where Sailor Moon did the change, these were like masculine changes, I guess, where that the cat got the power to like shoot a spotlight into the sky, and then Adam became like super strength and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I thought it was fun. There was it was also the era of like 1 million characters and everything. It's kind of like Thomas if you think about it. Like they just made like characters to make characters, and it's funny because when you're a kid you like latch on to certain characters and you're like, man, I like that character is my favorite. And so like I think I feel that way when it comes to like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like certain characters in like He-Man, or like I'm just like, oh, I really like Man of Arms, or like, Man, and I really like these. Manny faces. I really like Zorak. Or no. But you attach yourself to these, like, when you're a kid, you attach yourself to these, like, lesser known characters or side characters. And then, like, then you try to get their, like, action figure and then essentially sell you the product that is the cartoon.
Yeah.
It was another Filmation cartoon, and Filmation was really good at churning them out to make that money to sell toys to kids. That's kind of like, they were owned by a toy company, weren't they?
Yeah, well, they were like partnered with Mattel. But yeah, I mean, that brings us right into the history of He-Man. He-Man is truly a product of the 1980s, and we've talked about it before in other episodes, but there are currently laws in place that prevent direct advertising to children through television programs. These laws used to be much more relaxed, especially in the Reagan administration during the 1980s, with the Federal Communications Commission kind of not enforcing the laws that were on books at the time, and even repealing, I think, some of them, or at least voting to overturn some of them. And this allowed toy companies to create toy-based programming. And Mattel already had a series of toys that they knew what they wanted to do with. This toy line had actually been in development since the 70s. Mattel had a series of toys based on Conan the Barbarian that they started working on due to Mattel declining to produce Star Wars toys and realizing they made the biggest mistake in the world. Apparently, in 1976, Mattel was approached by a young and plucky George Lucas who said, "Hey, you want to make Star Wars toys?" And they said, "No, that sounds bad." And they missed out on potentially the biggest toy deal in existence, and that went to Kenner instead. So basically, Mattel had massive FOMO, and they wanted to capture the lightning in the bottle that was Star Wars, and they just started churning out toy line after toy line that they could potentially rival Kenner, and they would start working on these different toy lines all at once. The concept of He-Man himself reportedly came from Roger Sweet, who was a lead designer at Mattel, who took some fantasy drawings by Mattel packaging artist Mark Taylor for a character called Torak and began to develop prototype figures. Roger would propose the idea of 3 characters using the prototypes that he built off of the Big Jim line of toys, which were just a kind of generic muscular figure toy line that Mattel had. The ideas he had for prototypes were an axe-wielding barbarian, a soldier with a tank for a head, and a spaceman with a fun helmet that, in one thing I read, said was just a Boba Fett helmet that he put on the guy. The winning idea would be the barbarian, who became the basis of this new line that they came up with. I
feel like he sandbagged it. They're like, bring 3 different ideas, and he's like, this is the idea I like, and these are the 2 ideas that they'll hate.
Yeah, I think he definitely wanted to. He knew what he wanted.
He wanted to make a barbarian and an axe-wielding barbarian show. To be fair, it would be funny if a soldier with a tank for a head won out, and all of our memories were retrofitted.
What if He-Man was just a soldier with a tank for a head?
Yeah, like what if he like raised like, I don't know, like the flag of America or something, and the tank head like appeared, and then he rolled off to combat with all of his friends.
He yelled, "I have the power," but shot a missile out, and it just
Oh
flew,
yeah, and that he could hang out with his friends, like Nuke the Sub and
Nuke the Sub.
Nuke the Sub, who's just a man with a nuclear submarine for a head.
You see, we can make toys in the 80s, Seth. Let's go back in time.
Cheap Man, and you could do a whole line of just like military vehicle strapped to dude's face. So it's kind of like Street Sharks if they weren't sharks, but they were
military weapons.
They were military weapons.
Yeah.
So the working title for the toy line was Lords of Power, but would be changed to Masters of the Universe to avoid any religious connotations. A villain would be designed based on a sketch from Mark Taylor called The King of Sticks, which featured a muscular zombie figure wielding a scimitar and with a skull for a head and crown. This design would become who we know as Skeletor. Now that they have had the characters, they needed a story, and which is 100% something that happened regularly.
Yeah.
Literally, TV shows were made in a pitch room where toy companies would go to retailers, like big retailers, and at that time would be like Child's World or like KB or stuff like that. They would go to these toy retailers and they would say, "Hey, KB, we want you to carry this action figure." And they'll say, "Why, Mattel? Why would we do that? There's nothing about it that matters to the kids." And they'll be like, "Well, there'll be a comic." And they'll be like, "Oh, there'll be a comic. comic? And they'll say, yeah. And then they'll leave, and the person who's with the guy who just sold the comic will say, there's going to be a comic? And he'll say, yeah, we have to figure that out. And same thing with TV. But so now that they had the characters, they needed a story. So Mattel would go work with DC Comics to mock up some of the comic books. Toys R Us had concerns that children would read them. So then they worked the idea into a TV show. Literally in the pitch room, they would turn and say, you know what, let's do a show. They reached out to a company called Filmation to produce the television series. Filmation was originally founded in 1962, and they were no strangers to television. They were the production studio behind the shows like Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, Star Trek the Animated Series, and Ghostbusters, which is not to be confused with the real Ghostbusters, which was done by DIC and was called the real Ghostbusters because of the Ghostbusters done by Filmation, because they wanted to make sure that their show was actually about the real Ghostbusters and not about Ghostbusters that had nothing to do with Ghostbusters that you think of when you think about Ghostbusters. Filmation previously worked with Mattel in the production of commercials, so they already had a friendly relationship. The company would begin production of the show He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Before the show aired, however, Mattel ran into some issues. Mattel had been in discussion with the rights holder of Conan the Barbarian, who were considering a toy line for their upcoming movie due for release in 1982. And when Mattel released Masters of the Universe toys that same year, they were sued for infringing on the copyright. Mattel would win the lawsuit because Mattel was actually really good at winning lawsuits, with the understanding that He-Man was not, in fact, based on Conan the Barbarian, despite the fact that Roger Sweet has since claimed that he did, in fact, base some ideas off the work of Frank Frazetta and his Conan art. Because that Conan art and the Conan style of that pulp fantasy was really big up until, like, Dragonlance and, like, the conversion to the Tolkien era. And so, like, I think, of course, he's going to be inspired by it. But Mattel, there is a fun story about Mattel being very litigious and winning, is that Mattel, who are they're also the creators of Barbie, which is a small toy line that you might have heard about. They heard about that Hasbro was going to go to market with a Barbie-sized toy, and they heard that it was going to be a rocker Barbie, and it was going to be like a Barbie with a lot of like rocker chic kind of like punk, like, you know, just like kind of like cool Barbie-esque toy, because it would be Hasbro, so it could be Barbie, but it would be Barbie-esque. And they were going to hit that market and grab that market away from Mattel. And somebody told the president of Mattel, and so then Mattel said, well, we have an idea. Let's release a rocker Barbie version and get to market a month before Hasbro does. So then it looks like Hasbro copied us. And they did. And the Hasbro line of Barbie-like copies failed. And Mattel won because they were a very sneaky company.
Nice. The Masters of the Universe toy line stood out for a few reasons, but one of those reasons was it was simply bigger. They were in fact 5.5-inch figures instead of the standard 3 3/4 size figures that were used by Kenner or Hasbro. Along with the toys that were released, there was also a playset called Castle Grayskull, which was intended to be the location of the primary conflict in the story, and some of the early figures included He-Man himself, his comrade Man-at-Arms, He-Man's fighting tiger Battle Cat, the villain Skeletor, Skeletor's henchman Beastman, and later characters of Tila, Merman, Stratos, and Zodak, and it just kept going. There are like bajillion characters in the He-Man universe, largely because there are like a bajillion toys in the He-Man toy line. Basically, whenever there was a new release of the toy line, new characters would be added to the show. Much of the original lore of the toy line would be described in the mini comics, which had initially conceived He-Man as a wandering barbarian and the planet Eternia as a struggling world dealing with the post-war loss of its civilization. And then this would mostly get changed because the TV show needed to be a little lighthearted. In the show, He-Man is not a wandering barbarian. He is actually Adam, Prince of Eternia, who is the defender of the secrets to Castle Grayskull. He is joined by his tiger, Kringer, his fearless friend. Fabulous secret powers were revealed to him the day he held aloft his magic sword and said, "By the power of Grayskull, I have the power." Kringer would morph into Battle Cat, and Adam became He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe. His secret is kept between his 3 friends, Sorceress, Man-at-Arms, and Orko. Together, they defend Castle Grayskull from the evil forces of Skeletor. He is later joined by characters like Tila, who serves as captain of the Royal Guard, as she's also Man-at-Arms' adopted daughter. There is also Man-E-Faces, who is a man with many faces. And I love his name so much.
It's Manny faces. And he had the toy that had the spinning head.
It reminds me of the joke people always make whenever they're talking about Star Wars, and they say the many Bothans died, but they say it's Manny Bothans. Like, it's Manuel Bothans.
Manuel Bothans.
Now, the group primarily fights against Skeletor, who is a man who has a skeleton face, as in he's a very buff man. Like, he's ripped, but he just has a skeleton face. And Skeletor is joined by other villains, consisting of Beastman, Evil Lyn, Triclops, Merman, Trapjaw, Cobra Khan, and Clawful. And again, the list goes on, as there is a bajillion He-Man characters and a bajillion toys.
The show was initially pitched to ABC, though was turned down. The show was repitched during a NATPE conference to independent stations and was picked up for broadcast in over 60% of the country. The show would go on to enter syndication in 1983, becoming the first syndicated television show based on a toy line. By 1984, over 120 U.S. stations carried the show and aired it in over 30 countries. By 1985, this increased to 152 stations. He-Man was kind of that epicenter where it was well funded by marketing dollars because it sold toys, so they had a lot of money. And it also was a decent kids show, and stations needed stuff to air. He-Man is also notable for a few things. One, for being the fact that it is a somewhat violent show for being a children's show. Children's television typically opted not to show true violence, which is why a lot of cartoons in the later 1980s and 1990s often show characters being kicked rather than punched or fall off buildings, like poor Gaston in Beauty and the Beast. He-Man, however, did punch people. He also threw people, though while he did have a sword, he very rarely used it. There was also a controversy because, despite being legal, people were still annoyed that the show was basically just a glorified commercial. To attempt to subvert this frustration, morals were included in the episode, with characters often being taught a lesson that tied it into the story. Spoiler alert, G.I. Joe does this too, and they're also a glorified commercial. That's like a little trick that they do. That's not really a trick. The show would run for barely a year in its original release, going from September 26, 1983 until December 7, 1984. However, during that time, there were over 130 episodes produced, so it would stay in syndication for a real long while. In 1985, Filmation, in conjunction with Mattel, would work on a spin-off that aimed to target a young female audience. This show would become She-Ra, Princess of Power, which starred Princess Adora, Adam's twin sister. The story behind her is just wild. And she's like a sorceress. There's another sorceress who can't die until she becomes a sorceress. Then she becomes the She-Ra, and She-Ra's like a position. It's not really like her. It's weird. I watched a YouTube recently. It's fun that you wanted to do this on He-Man. I recently watched a He-Man mythology YouTube. So
I got recommended that video. I should watch that.
It's pretty good. But it goes into like the weirdness of She-Ra, and who's Adam's twin sister. She gets kidnapped, brought to a separate planet called Etheria, and she's able to become She-Ra, the Princess of Power, and she leads a great rebellion against Hordak, who is the tyrannical ruler of Etheria, who was the mentor and also hates now Skeletor. So like Hordak they don't get along. So Hordak is like the other villain. And so like there's Hordak, and guess what Hordak has? He also has an entire army of characters. And so does Skeletor. They all have just armies of characters. I watched a clip of Hordak, and he was just summoning random people from the water. It was kind of funny. One of them was like a fish man, and they just like live in the swamp. The characters would cross over with each other occasionally, such as in He-Man and She-Ra, a Christmas special in 1985, or the animated feature film The Secret of the Sword, also released in 1985.
There would be a live-action film, Masters of the Universe, which would release in 1987 and featured the characters of He-Man brought to real life. This film starred Dolph Lundgren as He-Man and Frank Langella as Skeletor. The story features He-Man, Man-at-Arms, and Teela being sent to Earth after a failed battle with Skeletor. They try to open like a portal to get away, and the portal sends them to Earth by accident, and there's kind of a whole fish out of water thing with He-Man, Man-at-Arms, and Teela being confused about Earth because it's Earth in the 1980s. On Earth, he meets an orphaned high schooler named Julie and her boyfriend, Kevin, and they hang out. In 1990, Mattel would release a new Masters of the Universe toy line, so they had to produce a new series. This series was produced by Para France Communications and Jetlag Production. Filmation was apparently in mind when they were working on developing this new series into the 90s. However, Filmation would go defunct, so they had to find new people to work on it. This show would be called The New Adventures of He-Man and ran only for 65 episodes from September 1st to December 7th of 1990 in syndication. In 2000, 2002, another reboot series aired on Cartoon Network called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, which I, again, mentioned earlier that I remember fondly. Mattel had wanted to revive the franchise again to produce more toys. The series, though, was not in syndication. It was only aired on Cartoon Network and also featured slightly darker tones, which kind of evident when you watch that opening title sequence where, like, Prince Adam is doing his speech and then immediately gets cut short by Skeletor blowing up a building behind him. So I wouldn't say it was, like, edgy dark. It just took itself a little bit more serious than the He-Man of the 80s did.
The show ran for 2 seasons from August 16th, 2002 until January 10th, 2004. From there, the series remained dormant until 2018 when She-Ra and the Princess of Power was released by DreamWorks Animation Television for Netflix. In 2021, Netflix also produced 2 He-Man shows, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe and Masters of the Universe Revelation. The prior is more of a child-friendly reboot featuring CGI art, and the latter is a more serious reimagining targeted towards adults and fans of the original 1980s series. And of course, the catalyst for this episode is that there is a movie slated for 2026. But beyond all that, He-Man exceeded just toys and TV shows. The character was featured in comics, role-playing games, memes, and of course, the subject of this entire podcast and reason why we meet every Sunday to talk about things and where somebody will timestamp and say the real episode starts here, video games. The first game to be based on the series would be Masters of the Universe, The Power of He-Man, developed by Mattel and published for the Atari 2600 and the Intellivision in 1983. The Atari version features a title sequence where a shirtless Adam turns into He-Man, and then the theme song plays. The Intellivision version does not feature the sequence, but does feature a slightly better rendition of the theme. Which makes sense. The Intellivision was Mattel's product, so they probably want their version to appear better.
That was something that like companies would do back then when it came to similar releases. So like Coleco famously did a port of Donkey Kong for the Atari 2600 and also did their version for the ColecoVision, and they would advertise the fact that the 2600 version looked awful. They would be like, look at how bad the Atari 2600 version of Donkey Kong looks, and look at how good it looks on the ColecoVision. And it's like, buddy, you made both.
Yeah. Both versions of the games are scrolling shooters. In the Intellivision, you blast at fire orbs that fly at you and drop bombs on Skeletor, who's running back and forth below you like he's on fire. Or are you just trying to save Skeletor's house?
He just runs back and forth at the bottom of the screen, and then you bomb him.
Wait, are you shooting the bombs, or are you blasting fire bombs on him?
No, you drop bombs on Skeletor, and you shoot fire orbs.
You shoot fire orbs and drop bombs. I got you. I was picturing you running above him, trying to stop fire orbs from hitting his house, and he was just sad that his house was on fire. You let him hit his house. Because you're like, screw Skeletor. The Atari version is kind of like this too, but instead of Skeletor running back and forth, there's a nondescript figures who kind of look like puzzle pieces, and they spell out "Buy Intellivision" if you run them across the bottom.
The next game would be Masters of the Universe, the arcade game, which is a misnomer because it was not released in arcades at all. Masters of the Universe, the arcade game, was developed by AdventureSoft and published by US Gold for the Amstrad CPC, BBC Micro, Commodore 64, and ZX Spectrum. The C64 version of the game goes by a different name. It's called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the Ill-Earth Stone. I guess that is a better name than He-Man, the Masters of the Universe, the arcade game, because again, this is not an arcade game, as it was never in arcades. The game is an action game where you play as He-Man and have to stop Skeletor. You run back and forth, fighting off various enemies and collecting items. When you enter Castle Grayskull, at least in the Spectrum version, the game turns into more of a platformer. In the C64 version, which I watched a clip from, I think it's just kind of already starts out as just a standard platformer, but the Spectrum version had a bit of depth to it almost. Like you can go up and down different levels and the outside of Castle Grayskull, and then when you get inside, it's kind of more of a flat 2D adventure. AdventureSoft would release another Masters of the Universe game called Masters of the Universe, the Super Adventure in 1986, also published by US Gold, this time released on the ZX Spectrum C64 and BBC Micro, not on the Amstrad CPC. Unlike the previous game, this game is an interactive fiction game akin to Zork, but with the graphics featuring the He-Man characters. Depending on the system you play at, the graphics range from looking pretty good to sometimes a bit frightening. And I put a picture, Seth, of what the game looks like on the ZX Spectrum version, and that's supposed to be Man-at-Arms.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it kind of looks like Man-at-Arms.
I thought he looked kind of terrifying. He looks haunted.
Yeah, he does a little bit. Or like he's in a different, like he's in a sci-fi game, and it's actually a game where you're a sci-fi man in the past, and Skeletor and He-Man are there.
Yes.
You are inside the crowded pub, and there is a man and a skeleton. Like, it could be, you could just be playing as that man. To tie into the movie, Masters of the Universe, a third game was developed for the Amstrad CPC, MSX, C64, and the ZX Spectrum by Gremlin Graphics in 1987, called Masters of the Universe, the movie. The C64 version starts with a fun rendition of He-Man's voice saying, "By the power of Grayskull," and then an 8-bit rendition of the movie's theme. The game is split into different game modes. You start in a top-down perspective, running around, shooting Skeletor's forces with orbs, and then you go around and pick up different items, and then are tasked with going to specific locations by characters like Leela or Man-at-Arms. When you get to certain locations, you have to fight off a boss in a 2D fighting sequence. Occasionally, there is also a first-person shooting segment where you have to shoot at various enemies who pop their heads out of buildings. At the end of the game, you have to fight Skeletor, who turns into his gold version from the movie. I didn't know he had a gold version.
Yeah, he turns like gold in the movie at one point at the end. I think it's because he gets the power of Grayskull.
Surprisingly, no He-Man games released on consoles like the Sega Genesis, NES, or Super Nintendo. However, when the show was revived in 2002, the game He-Man, The Power of Grayskull was released for the Game Boy Advance. Developed by Tadeko and published by TDK Media Active in 2002, the game is an isometric action game where you play as a pre-rendered version of He-Man as you go around saving your friends as you fight off various Skeletor forces. Reviews weren't great for Power of Grayskull. Game FAQ puts the game at 50%. GameSpot gave it a 41%, and a review from 2003 on the website honestgamers.com gave it a 2 out of 5 and called it a cash grab that is cheap, very cheap.
A follow-up to the Game Boy Advance game called He-Man, Defender of Grayskull was developed by Savage Entertainment, published in 2005 for the PlayStation 2 in Europe only. The game was slated to be released for the GameCube and Xbox and even ported to the GBA, but these versions were all canceled from release. The version that they did get, which was the PS2 version, is an action-adventure game where you play as He-Man from a third-person perspective. Your powers have a limit, so you need to keep an eye on your energy meters. The sorceress will occasionally contact you and provide you with assistance in traversing the planet of Eternia. The plot revolves around Skeletor luring He-Man away on a mission in a trick to assault and take control of Castle Grayskull. You have to travel across Eternia to reach Castle Grayskull and regain your powers, as the energy used to turn you into He-Man is diverted into defending the fortress. So you do get to turn into He-Man, but it's limited. The game received mixed reception on release. Nintendo Power would actually get a chance to review the unreleased GameCube version, gave it a 1.5 out of 5, and Game FAQs would give the game a 2.5 out of 5. He-Man wouldn't see another game until the release of a mobile title for Android and iOS in 2012 called He-Man, the Most Powerful Game in the Universe, developed by Glitchsoft, and it's a retro-style action platformer that was decently received. And a new game called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, Dragon Pearl of Destruction, is currently in development from Bitmap Bureau. This game is a 16-bit style beat-em-up akin to the classic beat-em-ups from Konami. So basically, it's like if we got a real He-Man, the Masters of the Universe arcade game instead of the Commodore 64 game that was called an arcade game, but it wasn't an arcade game. Would have been like if Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had a spiritual successor. That was He-Man. And Bitmap Bureau is probably a pretty good company to handle this. They previously were involved in titles like Terminator 2D No Fate and Xenocrisis, both of which are fantastic games, and I'm sure they'll handle He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, Dragon Pearl of Destruction with much grace and dignity.
I saw that game being developed by Bitmap Bureau, and it looks really good. It looks like fun stuff. It kind of gives me the Toxic Avengers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Revive feel to it. Now, but
yeah, it does. Yeah,
we'll see how it is, but it's a beat 'em up game, which is great.
I'm excited to try it out when it comes out. Maybe we'll see it at PAX. Who knows? But with that being said, that's basically it though for He-Man games, because to be honest, there weren't a lot. The majority of them were British. I don't know why He-Man was so much more popular in England in terms of video game production, but I guess it makes kind of sense because I think the sword and sorcery and the like barbarian craze got a bit more popular over there with things like Conan. I know there are movies like Hawk the Slayer and stuff which were really popular over there. But yeah, this is He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. It's exciting.
Maybe we should do a Conan episode.
Yeah, we could do a Conan episode. We could talk about the MMO where you can
be naked.
In any case, I think He-Man's fantastic. I think it's silly. I'm excited for the new movie. I really hope Four Non Blondes plays in that movie, because if they don't play the song from the meme.
And so I wake in the morning and I step outside and I take a deep breath and get real high and I see to the top of my lungs what's going on.
I will be very sad. That being said, though, we're going to get into our retro rewind unless Seth has anything else to contribute about He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
No, but I do know that one of our listeners, friend of the show, Colson, really loves He-Man, so I'm sure he'll appreciate this episode.
I'm sure he will. Getting into our retro rewinds, Seth had me play a game called Chrono Master for MS-DOS, developed by Dreamforge Entertainment and published by Capstone Software in 1995. You play as Rene Corda, voiced by Ron Perlman, who is a retired Pocket Universe designer for high-end clients.
Okay, so what does the character do? We know what Ron Perlman does.
Now that he's retired, he mostly just kind of sits around in a spaceship and chats with an AI called Jester, but he gets hired to restore 2 Pocket Universes that were put into a stasis. He needs to figure out why they were put into a stasis and restore them to their normal state. I traveled to one of the universes where I encountered a bottle on the ground. I opened the bottle and out emerged color-coordinated Jinn, who demanded I feed them. So I talked to them and they said, "Feed us." And I said, "What do you eat?" And they said, "Fruit." And I said, "Okay, I'll go find fruit." And then they summoned a talking magic carpet that I rode. The magic carpet told me how much he hates working for the Jinn. And it's kind of a bizarre game.
It's like Starship Titanic bizarre.
It's not quite on that level. It's got, though, this kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It's just got this kind of tongue-in-cheek humor to it. It's a point-and-click adventure game, and it is a bit goofy, but it seems like a game that you could probably sink some time into if you like sci-fi point-and-click adventures. The game itself was written by Roger Zelazny, who was a sci-fi writer who unfortunately passed away prior to the release of the game. They actually have a little in memoriam to him at the beginning, but he wrote a bunch of other science fiction and fantasy books like the Chronicles of Amber series, and this was apparently his last project that he did. So if you enjoy surreal multiversal adventure games, you might like this game. I think it holds up in its own right. Next week, Seth, I want you to play a game based on a product. It's actually based on a movie. That's True Lies for the Sega Genesis.
Oh, excellent. Zach had me play Mega Man X3 for the SNES, which was released in 1995 in Japan and then in 1996 in North America and the PAL regions. It's the third Mega Man X game and would be the last one to be played on the SNES. The game was developed by Miniakuchi Engineering and published by Capcom. In the game, you play as Mega Man X, and you also can have Zero show up and join you and play through the levels. There are 8 selectable stages. In each of the bosses that you beat, you get cool power-ups. I played through the first part of it and during this retro rewind, and I had a lot of fun. fun. I'm also not that great at Mega Man games, so I died a bunch. Even in the intro, I swear I just die. I'm just really bad at Mega Man. Of course, it holds up though. People still play today, love it. Mega Man and all the Mega Man, especially the Mega Man X series, is a really beloved franchise, and I think it's worth the playthrough if you want to go through and play it. And I know that it holds up. Next week, Zach, you could play Chronicles of the Sword for MS-DOS.
Great. I thought you were going to say Chronicles of Riddick.
I mean, you could play that too if you want, but no, I want you to play Chronicles of the Sword.
For what console?
MS-DOS.
Fantastic. Well, Seth, thank you for giving that to me. If anyone out there has memories of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, let us know by emailing us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found, be it Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. We're available on Patreon. Be sure to check us out there. And we're also available on social media, Classic Gaming Brothers, CG Brothers Pod, or on our website, www.classicgamingbrothers.com. Oh, and YouTube. Like and subscribe. Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's
right.
Right.